Revelers, this is Off the Rails, Right versus Left, the podcast that we do because we think the left is evil. I'm Rob B.
And I'm Brad Lee.
And I'm Brian G.
And we are Off the Rails, Right versus Left. Again, we're doing this show because we think everybody needs to know that the left is evil. All right, revelers, welcome back. We're continuing our interview series with candidates for the 2024 election. I'm kind of focusing on candidates that don't really get to be heard from as much and from some of the races that you don't really hear much about. Again, we got another congressional candidate here. We've got Darren Hamilton. He's for the Texas House of Representatives, District 57. I need to edit that in the scroll. It's the Texas House. But we're going to listen to him. He's running against Richard Hayes as the Republican. Colin Johnson is the Democrat. And you all know I'm a libertarian, so I'm all about getting a third party involved here. So welcome to us, Darren Hamilton.
Darren, hello, Rob.
Hello. Thanks for joining me on the show today. I'm having a lot of fun with these interviews. And
yes, I bet you are.
Yeah. So the first thing I always ask any libertarian or anybody who's from an independent candidate,
sure.
What do you describe as being a libertarian?
Well, I mean, if you talk about libertarians individually, it's always going to be something different. As a party collectively, we're usually promoting a vision of society where individuals have the maximum freedom to pursue their own lives without government interference. Individuals should always have the right to make their own choices in life, as long as those choices don't involve initiation or threat of force or fraud against somebody else. So as long as you're basically letting people do their own thing and live their own lives, you should be able to do the same.
Okay, I'm with that. Yeah, I that's almost exactly the way I describe it. I mean, to me, it's funny that a lot of times people pull liberal out of libertarian instead of liberty.
I've heard that.
Yeah.
I've heard
so the only way that we can be described as liberal in any way, shape, or form is that we have a liberal viewpoint as far as a classical liberal sense about like freedom of speech and
freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom to let people do what they want as long as they're not anybody else.
Yeah. So and then that's where so we end up being a crossover between the two main parties, because while Republicans are all about law and order in a lot of ways, a lot of libertarians think a lot of the stuff that people go to jails for shouldn't be illegal. What you do in your house is your own business. So a cop knocking on your door, nothing he sees going through your door, short of trafficking or something, human trafficking or something like that, where you're impeding on somebody else's rights, should even be in consideration. And then like decriminalization of pretty much anything. Obviously you can't drive under the influence, but beyond that, what you do in your house is your own business. When you get
you're not, as long as you're not behind the wheel, when you're in any case, in any way, I guess you could call it in an altered state.
Yeah.
Just to put it lightly. Then you're not really at a risk of injuring or in any way a threat to anyone else. I mean, if you're in your home, you're just doing, whatever you're doing, watching movies on TV or something like that. Yeah, you should be able to enjoy yourself, relax, do what have you. Your
Now, I
comments
do I
about
do want to bring up one thing because I don't want people to get an off impression. We spoke briefly in the private chat here before we started the interview.
yes,
Darren does have autism. He's got Asperger's, much
yes.
like Elon Musk, so obviously more than capable of functioning. So if some of his responses sound a little bit off, that's the reason why. There's no failure in
I
ability to think things through.
right.
It's just
I
harder for
have
him to compartmentalize.
it's difficult sometimes for me because I have an idea in my head, and it's difficult for me to express that idea in a way that somebody else might understand it. So there's
Yeah.
that.
So I just wanted to throw that out because if you stumble here or there, I didn't want
Oh,
people to get the wrong idea.
yeah.
So
As long as I have prepared notes, or as long as I have, it's difficult for me to be extemporaneous. But as long as I have at least something prepared, or at least an idea of what I'm talking about, you can't shut me up. That's the problem.
okay. So now here in Texas, like I'm glad that I have a Texas legislature candidate here.
Woo!
Have you looked at the financials for the state of Texas, the fiscal budgets?
I haven't. I haven't looked at those because, for the most part, at least here in my district, my district is in central Denton County. That's northeast of, or northwest. I'm sorry, northwest of Dallas. But the primary focus of the constituents here has more to do with societal impacts than fiscal or financial impacts.
Well, but I think fiscal and financial impacts actually lead to the societal impacts.
They actually do, especially in cases, and that's a big thing here in Denton County, is education. So we had like a multi-million-dollar surplus last year,
Mm-hmm.
and it was tied up thanks to our governor, that nothing could be done with it to help education, because he, was being please excuse me for my profanity, petty little bitch
Mm-hmm.
that couldn't be bothered to see the larger picture.
Yeah.
So yeah, I imagine that if there's again a surplus, my focus will end up trying to take care of the people that I think are the most directly responsible for our future, and that's the teachers and the education and the administrators.
Okay, so while you're talking about the teachers and the education, I actually interviewed another candidate for the Board of Elections as well. So,
Ah,
the one thing that I do think is an issue, like I think our STARS testing, we end up
oh,
with teachers teaching to a topic or
to the
teaching to a
test,
test
actually.
instead of to the
Yes,
topic.
yes.
So, but at the same time, like, how do we get the state to encourage parents to take an active role? Again, I don't believe in this whole homework thing either.
Right.
It's the
I don't
teacher's
either.
job. It's the teacher's job to teach the kids at school, and the only time they should have work going home is if they're not able to finish this assignment. But if like more than 10% of your students are taking home homework because they didn't finish the assignments in class, then you've got a teaching issue.
Yeah,
Um,
it's difficult.
so
It's really difficult.
the way I put it is like it's ridiculous that since we started getting these boards of education at the state level and at the federal level, we've gone from first in education down to last. And back then it was untrained teachers teaching all subjects to 50 kids, 100 kids,
Mhm.
200 kids at all different grade levels. And we were fine. We were number one in the world, and we had the highest literacy rate in the world. And that was with kids that had to work on farms and for much of our history and factories and everything else after they got out of school. And we were
Sure.
number one. And now we're
Right.
trying to hammer everybody down on a one size fits all basis.
Well, that's it. Unfortunately, as a statistician, I can tell you that makes things easier for the people on the other side. So, for instance, if you have only one, in my particular race last time, 2 years ago, it was just me and the Republican who is the incumbent now,
Right.
Richard. So I managed to acquire 34% of the vote only because they either voted for me, as there was no Democrat on the ticket, or they voted against him.
Right.
So it's one of the reasons that I threw my hat in the ring was because I don't like the idea of somebody just being given the office. The voters need to have a choice.
Exactly.
My choice, it was, me or him. They chose him. They may not this time.
Yeah. So, and yeah, I think both of the parties have kind of shown themselves to be
yes.
different sides of the same coin, and we need a different coin.
Yes, absolutely.
So
that's the fun thing. That's the fun thing about being a centrist, being in the middle, is that I can take from the right and I can take from the left those aspects that I agree with, and I can usually find a way to put them together into something cohesive that, if not everyone, most people can agree with.
okay. So so at the state level, would you be like, for example, we spend a fortune on prisons and whatnot. Would you
Yes.
be interested in like somewhat I wouldn't say decriminalizing, but editing how we charge drug offenses, for example. Like people could well, I'm gonna go a little bit further before I free you up on the answer, because like again, like we mentioned, what you do in your own home is your own business. But then if you go and commit a crime to feed your addiction, at which point instead of giving somebody 5 years in jail, confining them to a treatment facility for a year where they know how to block the behavior and break the behavior, seems to make more sense to me.
Yes.
Stuff like that, where it relieves some of the burden, because putting somebody in treatment for a year instead of in a prison for 5 years is going to be more affordable. And then hopefully we have somebody that comes back out on the back end, ready and willing to be a part of the society, and not go in with that burden of being a convicted felon. And I exempt violent crime from that. Violent crime, I think anybody who's violent, they eventually advance to murder. So anybody who commits a violent crime shouldn't get out.
Right.
But
well, one of the things that a lot of us who are libertarians, as both candidates and just politicos, talk about is the decriminalization of nonviolent crime. So as long as people aren't being hurt, there really shouldn't be any sort of punitive action associated with what is ostensibly a crime. So, for instance,
well, I don't think we can like restrict it that much to nonviolent crime, because like somebody steals your car without causing crime, they're still causing serious harm and infringing on your rights. I would say decriminalization of crime where there's not a victim, and we have a lot of laws on the books where there's crimes where there are no victims. Yes,
right.
But we can't call like theft and fraud and identity theft. We can't call that stuff victimless just because it's non-violent. Yeah,
just because it's not violent. I take your point. That's a very good point. For me though, it would be a matter of saying, okay, these crimes. Let's just take cannabis legalization. The restriction of cannabis and hemp being grown or used within the state of Texas is about as ridiculous to me as any laws that would govern the prohibition of potpourri or mulch. It doesn't make any sense to me. There's a lot of things that hemp in particular can be used for, building materials, wood, paper, medicines, what have you. It seems very ridiculous to me that those kinds of things should be disallowed simply because.
Do you know the history of the criminalization of marijuana?
I know one story about it, But please entertain.
The primary
Enlighten.
the primary funding for the criminalization of marijuana was paid for by the logging industry because hemp is a more productive alternative to wood.
I'll take it. I'll take it a step further. The primary factor in the criminalization of hemp and cannabis was focused from one particular person, and that was William Randolph Hearst, owner of the Hearst newspapers. And the primary reason for that is very much what you touched on, is because his newspapers were in contract with a lot of paper mills, especially in the northeast and the northwest, and cannabis, or hemp, because it grows so quickly, would have wiped out his essential monopoly on the newspapers, the newsprint that would have been, and so that's the story that I heard.
Yeah. Well, it was very tied in, but his involvement in it was at the behest of the logging companies and the timber industry.
That seems. I mean, it seems like a
because
really,
quicker renewing paper source that's cheaper
right.
would have actually benefited him.
Yes, if he had gone that way, but I
Yeah.
think he already had contracts.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, but yeah, it sounds like a perfect case of cahooting.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think government at the state level, the local level, it all needs to be like returned to the basic principles of the founding of our country. That
Right, give it back to the people.
it's about liberty, and up until there shouldn't be restrictions on the stuff up until you impact the rights of another person.
Right.
Which is why, like, the reason I'm so staunch on violent crime is people that are violent get more violent. It doesn't change.
It doesn't change.
So
the violence begets violence, and that's unfortunate.
Dishonest people are dishonest, and when it comes to dishonest people, I would say being more lenient at lower levels of offense, but with an escalating scale of punishment for repeated offenses.
For repeated offenses.
If you did, I mean, the point of our criminal justice system isn't primarily to punish; it's deterrence. And
it's supposed to be.
Yeah,
it's supposed to be deterrent.
Yeah. So, if the penalty isn't deterrent, then you do it again, the penalty should be worse, and we keep escalating the penalty up until the point that you're finally deterred.
Right, I agree.
So
I have really no problem with that. The idea for me, though, is that nearly 80 to 90% of the people who are currently in jail are there simply for simple possession, having it, not using it. Doesn't matter what it is. They had it, and so therefore they were charged as criminals for simply possession of whatever it is, contraband.
So I will counter that, because if you go back and look at those cases, I know what you're talking about, the studies that show that most of the people are there for possession. In probably 60% of those cases, other crimes were dropped to get a plea deal.
Yeah.
So they assaulted something, and then they had the drugs. The drugs was the lesser, so they agreed to the drug charge instead of the assault or the theft or the robbery. You follow what I'm saying?
I do.
But that comes up to another issue, ringing in prosecutor discretion. Like I particularly have an issue with prosecutorial discretion when it comes to violent crime, because I mean, you look at some of the statistics. I think it was from what was it, 2012 to 2022. Something like 252 murders that were committed by people that by all rights should have been in jail for violent crime, but were released under prosecutorial discretion. So
right. I saw one where it was the person had been released because there was no room at the detention facility that he was in. And apparently his case did not rise to the level of something that, okay, we're going to take somebody else and leave him in. No, prosecutorial discretion, I don't know a lot about it. Unfortunately, I'm not legal. But the idea of prosecutors being able to wheel and deal like a poker dealer,
Yeah.
saying, "Oh, well, we can give you this, and we'll trade you for that," and it seems very disingenuous.
I agree completely. Now, what about breaking up the sanctuary cities in our state? Because again, that's like a different form of prosecutorial discretion where you're choosing what laws you're going to enforce. These laws were written by representatives elected by the people, and the prosecutors, to me, don't have a right to override the will of the people on a whim.
On a whim, I would agree. If they're going to try to override the will of the people, they need to have somebody who's also a representative of the people,
Mhm.
for instance, a judge or some other uh, recognized authority, basically sign off on it and say, okay, my goal in this seat, should I be fortunate enough to get it, is to actually bring some accountability and some sanity back to Austin. Um,
Good
it,
luck.
Thank you. I realize that if I'm the only libertarian that's elected, it's going to be a very uphill battle. But the idea is that I normally go with when I'm being asked questions like this is, how is my position, or how is my opinion going to affect individuals, not just groups of people, but the individuals, especially in my district, but also throughout the state. Um, all individuals deserve to have the life that they want. They come to America. We've invited them to America to share in the American dream, and
I don't
then,
agree with that on illegal immigration.
well, not on illegal immigration, but
Yeah.
we have
Well, no,
invited a
but
lot of people.
that's where the sanctuary cities comes in, is on
Right.
illegal immigration and people declaring that they're going to ignore federal and state law and not
And
report.
right. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but haven't I mean there are sanctuaries in a lot of other states. I think California, New York, Illinois, that they are having problems with that particular idea. Is that correct?
Yeah, and yet
Because
they
I
go
get
and reinforce it. They've now passed a law in California, for example, where it's now illegal for a poll worker to ask for ID, even if their local jurisdiction voted for that kind of election security. And
right.
why? I mean, it's obvious why.
Yeah.
You only don't want to prove somebody's legally authorized to do something because you know that they're not. Um, it's like the idea of uh you know, you have to have an ID to get a job. You have to have an ID to rent an apartment. You have to have an
Sure.
ID to smoke cigarettes. You have to have an ID to, go to a bar. The funny thing is the same party that like is pushing the no ID and fighting back against sanctuary cities. They're the ones that wanted everybody to have
An ID, a national ID.
a shot ID card that you had to present
Hmm.
with ID. And then when it
Hmm.
comes to the most sacred right of all American citizens, the right to vote, they don't want any security on that. So that's
Right.
but it's the same people that are saying, well, our jurisdiction's not going to turn these people over to the federal or state government when they commit a crime.
Well, yeah, and I think the idea of a sanctuary city um, actually is fraught with a number of different issues. Your uh, mentioning of federal and state law, that's one aspect of it. But here's the larger problem that I see is that if a person comes to the United States illegally, they haven't gone through the visa process, they haven't tried to ask for amnesty, none of that.
Well,
If
and even the amnesty and the asylum that's
right,
being abused. people that don't have a right. The for voter clarity to according to international law, you have to claim asylum in the first country you get to, which pretty much limits us to Canada, which I guess if you're a truck car driver, they'd have a right to ask for political asylum the way that they were attacked by their government. Mexico, argument can be made that government is a narco state, so you could see if they're anti-crime that they probably would be persecuted and have a right to asylum. Cuba, Haiti, those are countries that actually have a right to apply for asylum. Outside of that, none of these other people from these other countries have any right to come here and claim asylum because they're safe countries they could have got to first.
Possibly, but at this point, as far as the sanctuary. So getting back to your subject of the sanctuary cities, the idea is that they are being given sanctuary to be prevented from, if they've committed a crime, to go back, be forced back to their country. If they've been, and in many cases, a lot of people think that the being in the country illegally is a crime. Well, it may be, but are they harming anybody? Are they is their presence actually hindering anything that is going on? They are still individuals, they're still people, and we should treat them as people, even if they don't have the legal rights that we do as Americans.
Okay, so I understand that, but like, as a resident of Crockett, Texas, I want my city government to look after me.
Yes.
As a resident of Texas, I want Texas to look after me. And as a citizen of the United States, I want the United States to look after me.
Right.
When everybody in our country is taken care of, then we can look at what we can do for people from other places.
For other people. Right. And I definitely agree with.
And there's not even an argument that there's no negative impact for people coming here that are not a part of the system, have no intention of becoming part of the system, have no intention of integrating into the society, because it's been proven that the less integrated a society is, the more conflict there's going to be.
Oh yes.
And absolutely. I mean, it shows clearly. I mean, we had the Balkan Wars to show it. We had the Armenian genocide to show it. We had even the Hutus and the Tutsis, where one side just managed to get all the propaganda arms, which is kind of starting to happen in this country. And they ended up leading a genocide by vilifying half of their population. So,
you're not like us, therefore you don't deserve to live.
Exactly. And so, but if you follow the legalized process, and then you like smooth that out, because the people coming are trying to integrate into society. I mean, I'm just a few generations back on my dad's side of my family, we're immigrants. So, so I mean, it's completely understood. But they came here and no German was spoken in the house. You know what I mean? Yeah. Their goal was to come here, integrate, and be American. And that, and like, so with the, but the bigger issue with the sanctuary cities is they also tend to see a rise in crime. And I'm not even going to make the argument that they commit crime at a higher rate, but their crimes aren't being prosecuted, so they don't have to hold them in jail. Because if they sentence somebody to 5 years in jail for a crime that they should have gotten 5 years in jail for, that gives the federal government time to find them and get them out. So a lot of times these prosecutors, following the sanctuary city stance, is just letting criminals back out into the neighborhood. And we know criminals on the loose commit more crime. Right.
Because they know that they can get away with it now.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's what's going on with the whole illegal immigration surge too, is people know that they're not doing it legally, but they're going to get away with it. And that's the reason why they're doing it. So I think our immigration needs to be expanded. I think first and foremost, the family environment in the country needs to be expanded. So we're having more kids because we
see. I don't necessarily agree with that. The family environment should be whatever the person or the people who comprise that family choose it to be.
Yes. Okay. However, the government does institute policies that infringe upon the family dynamics.
I agree.
They make if somebody ends up needing to resort to seeking help from the government almost incentivizes keeping them single, even though we've got statistics that show 70% of people in prison come from single parent families.
Right.
So instead of incentivizing, I mean, yes, you can live your life however you want, but there is a benefit to incentivizing family because the results are better when you have a cohesive family.
Right. The statistics prove that out.
Yeah,
yes,
exactly. So that was my point on that, is just incentivizing versus disincentivizing. And even at the state level in Texas, we disincentivize.
Okay, I don't know that for myself, but I will have to take your word for that.
So I mean, I actually blame a lot of what's happened to families on Ronald Reagan, which is ironic because I think he's the best president of my lifetime, but the things he did with restricting gun rights and no fault divorce, like, had such long lasting damage. You could arguably say he's done more damage to the country than Roosevelt did.
Yeah.
And Roosevelt was a wannabe fascist.
No, I think he was pretty much an overt fascist.
So,
I mean,
well,
just looking at it,
he didn't suspend elections, so
no, he did not. That much I
yeah.
will agree with.
So
yeah.
he did try to make the Supreme Court irrelevant, but he didn't suspend elections.
Right. Let's pack the court. Yeah. Yeah, I would. I'm sorry, I've lost track of what we were talking about.
It's okay. Well, I mean, the idea is to have a conversation, anyways.
Sure.
I'm not one of those guys when I'm interviewing people. I'm trying to play gotcha and get sound bites. I just want to talk things through with you and get an idea how you feel about stuff.
Sure.
And then like on a state level, you're going to be able to attack and go after like different things.
Right.
And if you haven't, there's a lot that can be done with the Texas budget. Like one of the line items I saw when I was reviewing it is like a $9 billion payments to Lockheed Martin. I want an explanation for that.
Yeah, that would definitely need to come with an explanation.
Yeah.
If you're going to put it, and I hate the idea of the governor being given a line item veto. That just, no, absolutely not. But the idea, if you're going to give money to someone, you're going to put in a line item that says, we're going to give $8 billion to education. Okay, great. Let's kind of branch out or explain how that's supposed to go, divvy it up type of thing so that it's evenly distributed. But if you're going to do something like give $8 million to a private company, then you better have a really good explanation, because I know I, for one, would probably just say no right outright.
Yeah, and then I think for like government contracts, I think we need to have more transparency in the bidding process, because you look at a lot of the bids, and you can't figure out why the company that was awarded a state contract is awarded the state contract until you find out that several members of the House or the delegation has business ties to that business, and it's like, oh, it all makes sense.
One of the I guess you could call it truisms. I don't know if it's actually true, but we represent it as being true. Truisms that we had in the Corps was never forget that your rifles are made by the lowest bidder.
Yeah.
Now,
or the person that had the best relationship with the government.
Our rifles were great.
A good example of that was I believe Armalite had a fully automatic machine gun that they tried to compete to get onto the to get as the replacement for what the M4s or whatever, and then they lost the bid, and they had the better bid, they had the more functional gun, but they lost the bid because
somebody knew somebody who knew somebody.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so the dirty pool's ridiculous at all levels of government. So it starts at the state level, because you get people that start off in local politics, go to state politics, and they take the same corruption all the way to the national offices.
Yeah, and see, that's one of the advantages that I have, because I don't have relationships like that with anybody.
Exactly. So I'd be saying the same thing. Like I've been out of my field for about 10 years. Nobody's got any sway over me. I'm not rich, but I'm okay. And Yeah, nobody's gonna tell me
Yeah.
anything. Like the closest I have to influence is there's certain things I can't say on YouTube, or they're gonna ban my videos and give me a strike.
Right. Well, now, and here's what's really funny is that I was at a candidate forum last week, and I presented the idea that, look, it's almost a foregone conclusion. There's very little chance that I'm actually going to get elected. But in that case, then I have really nothing to gain by telling you what I think you want to hear in order to secure your vote. But at the same time, I have nothing to lose by actually telling you what I think is the truth. And that makes me a very dangerous person.
Yep. And
Because
that's why the Republican and Democrat parties have done everything they can to make sure that third party candidates and independent candidates can't get elected.
right.
Including
Well, I mean, that's one of the
including rejiggering the process to where you have to pay you have to pay a fee for a primary, even if your party doesn't have a primary, and then pay the general election fee, and it's just ridiculous.
Yeah, I had to pay a fee in order to be on the ballot for this particular race. Neither of my opponents did, because the new law that they passed says only if your candidacy is not proven out by a primary. So in other words, those of us who nominate our candidates by convention, Libertarians, Green Party, Independence Party, you name it, or an independent candidate would have to pay the filing fee in order to get on the ballot, to make sure your name is on the ballot.
Yeah.
If you don't pay the fee, they can take your name off the ballot. But it doesn't seem.
And isn't it like $5,000 or something like that?
For a senator, like what Ted Brown was doing, yeah, it was $5,000.
Yeah, I interviewed him.
Yeah, I saw that. He's a great guy.
Yeah.
And then for federal House of Representatives, it's $1,250. And then and then it goes, successively down, farther down you go. Yeah, I had to pay. That's probably the most I've paid in all of my campaign from last year to now. That was probably the biggest budget expense.
Well, I'm going to be going big come 2026. I've already priced out doing flyers for every household in my district and signs for at least 30% of the houses in the district. So I'm already strategizing. So when it comes time, I'm going to be hitting it hard.
You need to, be strategic. I mean, I was strategizing as soon as I lost the last election.
Yeah, but so that's where I'm at. I already know who's going to win this election. Pete Sessions is going to be reelected, and it's just an irony to me that people keep reelecting a guy who, in 27 years in Congress, all he's done is gotten richer and named some postal office buildings and voted or proposed like commemorative coins and stuff, like some stuff that really doesn't matter and we don't need to be spending money on.
There was a comment that I had heard back in February, just after the whole just before the primaries, and they were saying that even state representatives should probably be independently wealthy because they don't pay state representatives a lot. And I'm going, that's the point. They're not supposed to pay state representatives a lot because they're supposed to represent the people of their district.
Yeah, and they're supposed to, and all these governments are supposed to be part-time. We're not supposed to have a full-time, even in the national level, we're not supposed to have a full-time House and Senate. The only full-time jobs are supposed to be the Supreme Court and the presidency.
Right.
Congress isn't supposed to
higher executive offices. Yeah.
Yeah. So
the rest is supposed to be part-time. And sure, they like to say that it's part-time. They have, these times, these, month and a half off during the summer and, I don't know, 6 weeks during the winter or something like that. But the idea is part-time. And, you go back to your full-time job, you go back to your life and you live your life, but understand that you are also representing the people of the area in which you've been elected.
Yeah. Now, what do you think about putting in like at a state level mandatory recusals for voting?
I like the idea. I'm not sure how well it would work.
Well, it just seems to me like you got to make some attempt
Yes,
because nobody is recusing themselves on the issues that they're personally benefiting from on either
right,
side,
exactly,
Republican,
exactly.
Democrat, or I don't know. I don't think I saw anybody on the list there that was even libertarian in the houses. And
There's nobody. There's nobody. As a matter of fact, there is nobody in the country at a state level right now
yeah, it's all
who
local.
is right. It's all local. Who is a libertarian? There was one in 2020 who got a state level seat, but he was defeated 2 years later.
Yeah. So
And so,
yeah, and every time a third party gets in the office, then the Democrats and the Republicans team up on them on the next one. They kind
oh
of
yeah,
they ignore each other and do everything they can to take out the alternative party.
yeah, and I fully expect that if I were to actually be elected, that they would actually do that.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I can provide evidence of this. In my last election, you can look it up on Wikipedia. There was no Democratic contender for me, so it was just me and the Republican who's now the incumbent. But after that, because I think because I got 34% of the vote, the Democrats took a look at it and said, "Wait a minute, we could have somebody who was on the ballot, and they probably would have been able to take, half of my vote, so 15%, just because he's got a D next to his name." And so they decided to put somebody up on the ballot. And as far as my research has gone, since last year when he was nominated, he hasn't done a thing. He's a
And
paper candidate.
that's Colin Johnson, right?
Yes.
Yeah, he got 4,000 votes in the primary.
Well,
So
he wasn't.
he got like 17. He
There
was
were no
unopposed in the
other. There
primary.
were no other candidates in the primary for
Yeah,
him.
but he got 4,000 votes in the primary, even though there were no other candidates in the primary.
Yeah.
I mean, I think a lot of people turned out to vote that were Democrat in the primary,
Mm-hmm.
trying to push Colin Allred, who's another do nothing paper guy,
Right.
trying to push him through to challenge Ted Cruz.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so it's ridiculous. It's all dirty pool, and
It,
the irony is, from a social standpoint, as a libertarian, you're going to line up with a lot of what the Democrats wanted. And if you
right.
did that much, if they'd been smart, they would have like supported you trying to get the seat away from the Republicans.
Right.
But it
But
proves that it's just tribal like dirty
yeah.
games.
So just before the last election, I actually attended a Democratic Party event because we agreed on the topic that was being touted about for this event. But I walked in and I was pariah. I was, it was, you're not a Democrat, so we're not going to address you, which is really weird because I get a lot of people coming up to me, like they did at this meet and greet some time ago, last week, and they were saying, I'm really a libertarian, and I'm going, you really don't have to say that, because if you were a libertarian, it would be obvious. So it seems to me like what they are is afraid of actually stepping away from being ridiculed by their tribe, whichever tribe they associate with, for even, deigning to talk to somebody who is not of their tribe.
Yep, exactly.
I mean, they're perfect. I mean, they're experts at fear mongering.
Yep, for sure they are. And there was one more thing that on the House level I wanted to mention, or the state House level, and now I can't think what it was. Oh, I
You'll
hate
come
when
back
I
to
do
it.
that.
Yeah,
Oh
you'll
well.
come back to it.
So but yeah, no, let's see, I already touched on the crime, immigration.
Mm-hmm.
On the education aspect.
Yes.
I do like that they're starting to free it up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But what I would like to see, instead of STARS testing, like
Mm-hmm.
aptitude testing.
Absolutely.
So in most of the most successful educational programs in the world, they test for aptitude. So people that are mechanically aptitude or have a
Mm-hmm.
mechanical aptitude, they get towards that. Engineering, they get
Mm-hmm.
towards that.
Mm-hmm.
Agricultural, they get education towards that.
Mm-hmm.
So especially since a lot of times they're just going to kind of trend to those fields anyways. Then you send them into the workforce actually prepared and trained,
Mhm.
and then again, we don't have to bring in labor from outside sources because we've already got people trained in these
Because
fields.
we got people. When I enlisted, I was given the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery, the
The
ASVAB,
ASVAB, yeah.
and I am my IQ is above the genius level, but that doesn't mean I'm still not a doofus. Anyway, but I mean, I aced all of the pieces that were, trivia questions, do the math, or how, how would you figure this part of things out, or what's the capital of Vermont, which is Montpelier. But those kinds of things, those were easy. It's the skill stuff that gave me a little bit of an issue. Um, but I absolutely, with your idea of aptitude, let's give these kids aptitude tests and then come back after they've been trained and give them a similar aptitude test and see if they do better at the tests. Aptitude tests, I think, would be a far better use of trying to make sure that we are teaching the kids what they need to know to become not just members of our society, but leaders of our
Yeah.
society.
And then I'd also think that like in some way like we obviously like have a teacher shortage
Yes.
because what do we hire? We hire a bunch of people that are certified to be teachers, but then like if you're able to veer off into aptitude type testing, then you can get people that actually work in those fields, that have the
Yes.
experience in those fields, and like offer to them some pointers on need to hit this and this as far as
Mm-hmm.
standards, and
Mm-hmm.
let them go, instead of like teaching people to be teachers and then trying to get them to like pick up another subject, where when
Right.
you really need a thorough understanding of the subject to teach it, and maybe a lesser understanding of modern teaching theories that are
Right.
clearly ineffective.
Right. I mean, I could probably teach architecture, but not very well.
Right.
I could teach science, but not very well. I'm a computer guy, so I could teach computers really well. That doesn't mean I'm a good teacher, and I have evidence to back that up. But the yeah, if we could get aptitude testing, and we could get the people who have expertise in those areas to help us out in the education industry, that would be, I think, an amazing start.
So, and you know what what else I think would be an amazing start, if Texas became the first state in the country where every person who graduated high school understood how to do their taxes, understood how debt works,
Yeah.
who
Why
under
aren't,
and
why aren't any of
yeah.
those kinds of things taught in school? Oh, because it's not as important as knowing that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell.
Oh yeah, or the Pythagorean theorem, or
Right.
that
You
unless you
know.
work in engineering
Right.
or something like that, you're never going to use. But
Right.
the stuff that
The-
everybody has to know, we don't teach.
right. And here's the really funny thing, and this is something I saw in a meme, was that if teachers were really had the idea of what is it, influence over our kids, more people would use apostrophes better. So if they were actually trying to indoctrinate our kids, if teachers were actually trying to indoctrinate our kids, more people, I think, would use commas and apostrophes a lot better and a lot more properly. But that's not what's important to people. What's important to people is it seems to me that what's important to a lot of people is that their ideas, the way that they see things, is what's being promoted in the schools and the societies and so on. Everybody has a different opinion, and that's why there's a lot of argument.
Well, and it's because it comes down to the 1922 Comintern. They knew that they could never use the class argument that they used to get socialism and communism propped up in most countries in the United States, because we had a middle class. So like part one of the plan was get into the education system and use racial division. And then what do you see in the education system? You get all these so liberal, they're communist teachers pushing critical race theory and division, and So personally, I think maybe we should focus more on ABCs and 1, 2, 3s instead of LBGTs.
Yes, I'm actually more concerned. I mean, at the elementary school level, yeah, sure. Concentrate on the subjects that actually form the basis of critical thought. But once you start getting into the middle school and the high school level, start teaching these kids things that they actually need to know. Being somebody who's autistic, mental health is a big idea of let's get people in there who actually have an idea of how to help kids who are by far the most stressed members of our society because of all of the things that are changing both in their brains and in their bodies and so on. But also
and then there's a combination of technology interfering with the way their brains work.
Right, and a whole bunch of other things. So let's get people in there into those areas, middle school, high school, that have the ability to say, okay, we're going to study things like meditation, not as a religious idea, but as a form of emotional calming type of thing. Let's study. Let's study real world history rather than just the European world history or American world history from the American point of view. Okay, so for instance, what did the Qin dynasty think of all of the people who were rebelling against the idea of becoming China?
Right.
Take it from that perspective. Learn somebody else's perspective, and you may have a better idea of how to work with them in certain areas. Work with them in the workplace, and understand where they're coming from.
Yeah. Well, and like a lot of people say, use like the tagline, "Oh, diversity is our strength." No, diversity is our weakness and an opportunity.
For certain people, I agree. Yeah, diversity.
Across the board, because it presents another challenge. Because like a lot of the problems that we have in this country exist only in this country because we're the most diverse country, and and then you compare it to like Scandinavian countries where they didn't really have many problems because it was a completely homogenous society. So what it actually does is it does present a different challenge because it's hard to get on common grounds when you have a different cultural perspective, a different language base, a different idea base. And like having been to 70 countries, I can tell you people in other countries do not think the way we think.
No, they don't.
Yeah. And that's impactful as well. And like on the state level, I think that I wouldn't like as you get further and further down on the levels, I think we need to do more and more on a personal level. But now it's almost to the point where like the state of Texas acts like a mini federal government, and now they might as well be in Washington as disconnected as they are from people. Like you take the schools examples. They want to hum and haw about like making the schools like a fortress, but good luck getting inside the state house with a weapon.
Or anything like that. Yeah.
And I think arguably our kids are far more valuable than a bunch of politicians.
I would agree, even as a politician.
Yeah. So I mean that's how I feel about it. Like,
yeah.
So like it's ridiculous that they don't think the schools need at least the same level of security that you have protecting them.
Right. And there's I mean, if you're talking about school safety and school security, there are thousands, almost millions of veterans throughout the state who would be more than willing to spend time being, a security guard for a school.
And probably at not huge range, not huge rates either. Like, I mean, you wouldn't have to like they'll pay off-duty police officers $30 an hour, but I guarantee you, there's veterans that'll go out there and do it for 10.
or 10, 15. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Because they have the training, and they have, in many cases, the mindset of, I am here to protect.
Hmm.
It's up to me to protect this. And so that's what we're trained up for in the Corps. That's what my sons were trained for in the Army. My daughter was trained for in the Air Force. So it was, the idea is, you protect those who cannot protect themselves.
Exactly.
And that's what
Which is
I
why I
think
won't talk to you about abortion, because it's the one thing I can never agree with on the rest of the libertarians. I don't get I don't get the dichotomy of saying the woman's right to choose, but nobody's protecting the baby. That's a
Well, I
weird one
get
on the
that.
libertarian stance.
Yeah,
Like
I get
the
that.
the one in that situation that's being given no choice and is defenseless is the one that everybody ignores in the favor of the woman who made a bunch of bad decisions to begin with. Is that, as somebody who already made 15 bad decisions, is that the one that we're going to trust to make a good decision when it comes to continuing the life of a baby?
Right. And unfortunately, there's no winning in this particular instance.
Well,
I mean,
absolutely there is. You return to the values of 20 years ago where abortion was safe, legal, and rare, but wrong. And everybody knew it was wrong, and nobody pretended it was okay, and nobody pretended that it was the right of a mother to kill the baby. But there were times it was necessary, so it should be safe, legal, and rare. But that's not
absolutely.
the but
Far more rare than it actually
but
is.
that's my issue with Democrats, because on any issue, once they get a win, they don't take the win and go home. They push the next level.
You're right.
They get gay rights and gay marriage, and then now it's on to transgenders, to where now we're ripping whites away from women to give the people with a definitive mental illness a superiority, which makes no damn sense whatsoever.
Yeah.
And even the idea on that of like, we've got to affirm them for their mental health. Okay, well then you better start prescribing diet pills to people that are anorexic and bulimic if you're affirming people's
Mhm.
delusions about their own body.
Right. And I mean, that's the really big dichotomy that I see between both the Republicans and the Democrats. So the Republicans always talk about, or at least they seem to always talk about, individual rights and individual liberties and so on. Whereas Democrats, they're very progressive in their ideology, but it all seems to be based on groups.
Mhm.
So you have to identify with a specific group. Otherwise, your opinion on topic, name your topic, is invalid because you don't identify with that particular group. You're not part of that team. And I just
Well,
don't agree with that.
the reality is there is no Democrat and Republican Party anymore.
Oh, I know.
They both just want to spend all of your money while they're simultaneously, like, I don't know, trading stocks on non-publicly available information, such like that. And
yeah.
then
No,
on the
I
flip
see it.
side, they're telling everybody how to live their life. It's just which
Yes.
subjects they choose to tell you how to live your life on depends on whether they're on the right or on the left. So
Right. Which form of authoritarianism do you like? Do you like the bottom of the boot or the top of the boot?
there you go.
It's
Yeah, do you want to be kicked by the toe or squished under the sole?
under the heel. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So
I mean, it's yeah. There are two sides of the same coin. They're essentially, in my opinion, they're cahooting.
and a good example of that is personal property rights.
Oh yes.
Why does anybody have a right to tell me what I can do on my property? Why do I have to
And
get a permit to do what I want to do on my property?
right. And why should that actually impede? Why is the government in any way? I mean, so we in Texas have to pay property taxes.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't matter if you have a shack or a mansion, your property tax is going to be monstrous, given, whatever
I
it
can
is.
actually debate that, because I built a little tiny house in the woods and my property taxes are only like $150 a year.
Oh, that's nice.
I'm very
Yeah, if
rural.
you,
But that's my house. Now it's a different story with my fiance's
right,
house
right.
here in Crockett, which is why I'm going to end up being in Pete Sessions' district. We're getting married here in December, so I'm going to be out here at her house.
Congratulations.
She's got an adult son who's autistic, who's barely verbal, so like
Okay.
it's easier for me to relocate out here than for her and him to try and move into my tiny house.
Sure.
But here's the issue I have on it. Okay, if I want to have a flame shooting cannon on the roof of my house, I should be able to, as long as it's not pointed at the neighbors. If you follow what I'm saying.
I do.
Like, if I want to build a house on my property, great. If I want to build a store in front of my house, great. Like, the government doesn't have
But
any right to tell me. Now, when it
you
comes to
shouldn't.
how I build, like, Adobe structures last for hundreds of years, yet
Yeah.
they wouldn't pass the muster under the current
Oh no, because it's
construction
got to have all
regimes.
these safety restrictions, and you've got to, like, for instance, I know of one person who was trying to build something in a little farther north of where we live, and they were getting all kinds of heat because they had to have municipal plumbing. They had to have the electrical, things like that, and they didn't want to do that. They just pretty much wanted to live off the land, to have their little garden plot, and
Yeah, they wanted to have
the
an off-grid lifestyle.
off-grid lifestyle. Absolutely, and that should be allowed. The government should not have any say in that. If you own the property, if you own the land, and that's recognized by the state, if you own that particular piece of land, they should have no reason to come and tell you how to live your life.
Yeah, and to go back to the Adobe style, like, you even say, like, safety issues, things never
Yes.
going to burn down.
Right.
Like,
I mean,
it's gonna survive any storm that we get here.
almost, pretty much, yeah. I
So
mean, it
now
may
now
not
I
it may
now
not survive a
on
tornado,
multi
but
on mont, on regulating multifamily dwellings, this I understand, because
right,
multiple people are going to be there. But if I
right,
want to build a death trap and live in it, that's my right. And then, of course, I would have
absolutely,
to close. If I go to sell it, I would have disclosure responsibilities, and they would obviously have due diligence to do as
right.
a
But see,
buyer.
the
But as
difference
far as
is
what I do with my land, if I'm keeping my land, it's nobody's business what I do with my land.
exactly. But the difference here is that with all of what you're saying, with the multi-property, yeah, there's multiple people, and if you decide to sell your land, you're going to have the responsibility, the personal responsibility, to disclose those features. It ties into personal
Yeah,
responsibility and
and
individual rights.
yeah, and that already exists. If you have a
Yeah,
100-year-old house, you have to disclose that it's got, lead paint and asbestos in the walls.
yeah, if it does.
But you get what I'm saying. So,
Yes,
like,
absolutely.
so it's no difference if I build an Adobe house and I say, oh, by the way, yeah, those boards down there are so you can access the pipes. The boards in the middle of the wall are so you can access the wiring, because this is an Adobe house. It's 100% Adobe.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? That's kind of like going to be clear to the buyer anyways, and then I have the right of disclosure, and, like, as long as you're not going to overload the system because you're doing something crazy, like,
Right.
if you make your house a fire hazard, that's on you. That has nothing to do with
Yeah.
anybody else. And
Right.
a lot of their restrictions are kind of, like, ridiculous. Like, I get, like, electrical has to be above plumbing because you don't want water on electricity.
Right.
That's a
Yeah,
regulation
there's safety concerns.
yeah, that's a
Right.
regulation that makes sense. But
Right.
how frequently I have to have staples on that electrical wire as it goes through the or
Right.
electrical holders as it goes through the wall, that's none of the government's
Yeah, it has
business.
to be like every 18 inches or something
Yeah,
like that. Yeah.
and it's ridiculous. And then, like, if you do a full concrete, or, like, in my example, the Adobe the old style, like, traditional
Mhm.
Adobe building,
Mhm.
you're not going to be able to do that, but it doesn't make your
Mhm.
house more unsafe. It's just the perception that you have. And what are all those requirements about how you do it anyways? So if somebody else comes in, they don't accidentally put a nail through the wire. Like,
Mm,
I mean,
yeah,
that's what it really comes down to. And, like, and then again,
that's
that's,
what it
like,
seems like.
ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean,
So,
and they
like,
still have to, I mean, whenever, even in a house that was built by contract, my house was built by contractors.
mhm.
Okay. So even in that, if we were to, want to take out a wall or create a doorway into another room, there would be all kinds of regulations about that. That
Yeah,
shouldn't have to happen.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, like in my tiny house, like I had to put the things up on blocks so it wouldn't be considered a permanent structure because they
Oh,
try and
yeah.
regulate how many square feet you have. I'm never at
Yeah.
my house. I go home to sleep. I have a TV in case I need to watch TV. I got a bathroom and a little kitchenette, and that's all I
Hmm.
need. Like at the
Hmm.
time I was never home, so I didn't need more. Why does the
Yeah.
government have a right to tell me how much I need to build in my house? And I get the ideas they wanted to like avoid people living in row houses, but passing those restrictions, which you actually did, and we'll talk about like effects on minority communities. As soon
Oh,
as they
yes.
passed those regulations on minimum square footage, the housing ownership in minority communities went through the floor
Yes.
because now there's not affordable houses anymore.
And that's an issue that we need to address in the next session too, is affordable housing.
Yeah, and
Because,
but I think if you free people up on how they're able to build,
well, free
you
up the
cure that.
regulations. Free
Yeah,
up the regulations. Let the people, if they want to build their own house, if the let them build.
yeah,
In those areas, zoning regulations are just horrible. Where you
yeah. I
have
mean,
to have
if
this is
the
only for houses, or this is only for retail, or whatever.
Well, most of Texas is zoning free anyways. So,
Yes.
it's one of the things I love about Houston, how you like you find everything everywhere.
Yes.
I love that. Although they get a little
Yeah.
ridiculous with their historic districts. Yeah, that's
Districts. Yeah.
ridiculous. A house
Yeah.
that's been there is not historic just because it's there. But
Because it's, yeah. I lived in Houston before I joined the Corps, and then after I got out of the Corps for briefly before I moved up to Dallas.
yeah,
So
so
yeah,
I
I
mean,
am familiar.
yeah, the Heights district there is like a good example. And
Yeah,
now
Montrose as
they have
well.
yeah, they have well the Montrose is up there by the height. Oh no, you're thinking lower Montrose, like over yeah.
Yeah,
So yeah,
where
and so it's
all the little houses and the condos and everything like that. Where
and now it's ridiculous. The multifamily
yeah.
dwellings there are complete like death traps, but they're okay
Hmm.
and they have to stay there because they're historic.
Right. Go
When like
figure.
everything has its life expectancy, and probably should be removed. But yeah, I see it as an issue as that's the state and some degrees the federal governments and then the local governments overstepping their bounds and controlling what people can do. And again, libertarian, I believe in liberty. You can do what you
Right.
want with your own property.
Right.
Back in the
And you
settlement
should
days,
have
people built log houses with no power or water, and they could do that.
and they could do
And if
that.
the water company water companies and utility companies should not be connected to the state. And so if the water company and the power company they should be obligated to figure out what they can do to safely connect you and not try and tell you what to do.
Right.
You follow what I'm saying?
I
Like
do. Yeah.
if they come and do the inspection and your plumbing's not going to handle the pressure, okay, great. They should have a pressure regulation, pressure regulator outside of your meter, not the other way around. Try and dictate how you
Right.
build your entire house
Right. Yeah.
to
You have to
connect to
have
their
it for,
system.
200, like the electricity. You have to have it for 110 volts AC, and it has to be like that everywhere. And it's like, wait a minute, what if I don't want electricity? It doesn't matter. You have to have it.
Right.
What if I don't want plumbing? It doesn't matter. You have to have it. And
Yep.
yeah, they were having that kind of issue in Pennsylvania, in rural Pennsylvania too,
Yeah,
with the
I'm working
Quakers
on
and the
I'm
Amish.
working on designing a new house, and I'm looking at okay, so in order to meet the building requirements, I'm gonna have to have a hollowed out place in a wall with a board in it, where the wall would be stronger if it wasn't hollowed out, but I'll have to have a hollowed out place in the wall with a board on it that I can tack the wiring on to meet the wiring requirements. It's
Mm,
ridiculous.
yeah, it is. It
So
is.
it's that or build another false wall, and I don't want that. I want the Adobe inside and outside. I want it to look that way. Although I'll be doing an adjustment instead of using clay because it's more brittle and the extreme temperature
Mhm,
changes. I'll be doing
mhm.
dirtcrete where instead
Oh,
of
okay.
clay, that portion of it'll be concrete or cement.
And,
So
and just jumping back way to the beginning, hemp is supposed to be really good for building materials
oh,
because
absolutely.
it won't burn. If you treat it right, you put it in with hempcrete or something like that, it's not going to burn.
So
It's immensely strong.
I will just throw in one thing. If you get in and you're able to free up the hemp industry, that would be absolutely wonderful.
Yeah,
But like
I
let's
see no reason. I see no reason why hemp or cannabis or anything else should be regulated any more than any other agricultural crop.
yeah. Well, yeah. Well, but the
and
reason they did it is because you can't tell the difference in looking at it, whether it's a hemp plant or a marijuana plant.
right, I
Which,
get that.
but
But
who cares? Make it a marijuana plant. You're still going to get the same fibers out of it.
right, you're going to get the same thing. The only thing you're not going to get out of it is the THC.
Exactly.
I mean, but again, it shouldn't be regulated any more than any other agricultural plant. And the fact that it is, and that it's illegal to even grow, just says that it's like they're still holding on to old ideas, like wearing socks with sandals. I don't know. It's just the having those kinds of regulations for something that has been cultivated for 8,000 years just seems ridiculous to me.
Yeah,
and so yeah, that's definitely
the
something I would like
ideas that
to.
are well, and then like all these building materials, you have to follow these codes, all these codes with all these building materials, and then
Mhm.
yet we're still using like organic building materials that are eventually going to foster mold and mildews that are actually more dangerous than any
Right.
risk of fire hazard. Like
Yeah, and hempcrete doesn't do that.
exactly.
Yeah.
So
So I mean,
yeah,
you've got all of these things, and it's either designed for, oh, what do they call it? Planned obsolescence, or you've got it overregulated so that they have to go back to the planned obsolescence idea.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, so like freeing up the regulation there, I think would make housing a lot more affordable,
Yes.
especially in Texas where we have so much land. I don't know how much of an issue it is. I know there's not a lot of federal land here. I don't know how much state land there is,
I
but
imagine there's a lot.
yeah, but I'm of the opinion like the state government is supposed to exist just to facilitate the workflow of people, and the state does not have a right to own property, and all of
Correct.
that property owned by the state outside of like specific like park and recreation areas should be
Right.
returned to the
It should be returned
citizens
to
and
the
be put
people.
back on
Yeah.
the public market. They had no right to like
Unless
steal
they're
that
doing it
anyway.
for, yeah, unless they're doing it for specific habitat, or specific conservation or something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
absolutely, free up that public land and let people use it.
yeah, well, and like around Lake Livingston, they turned that into a reservoir. Okay, that's an
Mhm.
understandable public need.
Sure.
But like, yeah, animals come and go, and
Yeah.
so like
It's
designating you can't
called
use this.
migration.
Well, no, I meant as far as like doing reserves to protect a certain species and
Oh,
whatever.
yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that's a ridiculous misnomer, because then you get into situations like the Northwest, the entire logging industry was destroyed, which helped
Hmm.
facilitate their like slide in the hell of the left, because
Hmm.
they got rid of all the blue collar loggers. And
Hmm.
why did they do it? To save the spotted owls. But the spotted owls are just like the mix of like a great horned owl and a barn owl. As a matter of
Hmm.
fact, you don't ever see any paired couples of spotted owls because they're not a real species.
Well,
And
and
yet they destroyed
also,
an industry to save a species.
right, save a species that would find its own way. I
Exactly.
mean, granted, yeah. See, granted, it's we also have to be stewards of the environment, and we have to understand how our presence affects that environment. But there's a lot that goes into a lot of those, that people are just, okay, let's just stop. We want everything going on this way rather than,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah,
Well, we want to control you this way. No, we want to control you this way. I mean, that's what it still
yeah,
comes down to.
it
And
does.
I've had it with Republicans who always talk about freeing up regulations, and they get in, they don't get rid of any regulations, and they add a bunch
Yeah,
more.
I had a friend of mine, relative actually, who said that he would never have voted for me anyway, even though he's not in my district, but he would never have voted for me anyway because he votes Republican. And I said, okay, great. So, what are some of the overarching ideas that the Republican Party espouses? And he listed off a couple, and I said, okay, great. Now, how many Republicans in office have you ever seen doing any of that? And he couldn't. It blew his mind.
Yep. So
So
yeah, it's like my argument. Like, uh, my congressional district here, Pete Sessions. He's never
Mhm.
once voted to restrict spending. He's never once voted to term limit anybody. He's never voted once to um, uh, put forward balanced budget amendments. He's never once put forward any bills that like restore like rights that were illegally taken by the federal or state governments.
Right. Right.
And yet that's supposedly what the Republican Party is about.
It's supposed to be.
Yep.
But again, how often do they do that? They say so that every 4 years they release their party platform. Both the Democrats and the Republicans release their party platform. And these books are thick.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, 200
and they don't need to be
pages. And they don't need to be. The Libertarians also put out theirs, and it can go on a sheet of paper.
Yep.
It's
and the overwhelming
simple.
principles: cut spending, restore freedom.
Yeah. It's like we're supposed to be the party of liberty, the party of principle, but nobody seems to want liberty or principles. They want to be told what to do or something like that. And that's, I mean,
they want their side determining what everybody else has to do.
Right. It's like it has to be my way or the highway option.
Yeah, and so it's like time to push back and say no. It's time for everybody to get their own way.
And
as long as you don't impede on somebody else.
I think that's actually starting to happen now. People are starting to recognize that it's not going the way that it needs to, and they're starting
I honestly think parties. Like the newer generation of Republicans are starting to come along there. Mm-hmm. But I kind of think it's time for the death of the Republican Party, get a true libertarian party platform.
Right. Well, if
we push enough liberty, we'd sift off enough Democrats.
Yes,
that your real candidates would be either a libertarian or an independent, and Republicans and Democrats will be fighting over the scraps.
Right. We can hope. We can only hope.
I mean, it's the goal, but we got to do the work. So
we do. And one of the things that I think it really needs to happen is that more people need to step up and stand up as libertarian candidates. Come and say, hey, I'm going to stand for libertarian principles, and I'm going to go on the ballot. I know I'm not going to win, but we need more people to be able to talk about these principles in a way that hasn't been available to us, which is, again, thank you for this invitation.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not a big channel, but like, I mean, it completely like can go completely weird because like I've gotten thousands on the clips from the interviews. I've gotten thousands of views on all of the interviews across the platform. So like some word's getting out there, and I'm assuming the people that are sticking around to watch it are people voting in Texas. That would be the presumption.
I've got videos on TikTok and YouTube and so on. And my only hope is that it's the whole 6 degrees of separation. Maybe the person who's watching it doesn't live in my district, or doesn't even live in Texas, but they know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody that might.
Exactly.
And so, there's always that hope.
And then I hope through it I get the one that really takes off, because I have like I've done clips. I've done clips from other interviews, and I did a clip from a Pierce Morgan interview, and that thing I got like 3 million views on. So like, I mean, I can always hope, but it's not just the libertarians. I was trying to do the Solidarity Party candidate for president and a couple independents. I've interviewed a bunch of independents. I interviewed a Democrat who's looking to Chuck Crenshaw, because that guy, nothing about his voting record said that he's conservative or principled or even has any integrity. So like, but the other person's never going to get any sort of, as a Democrat in a district that's like 80% Republican, he's never going to get any coverage. So I brought him on to talk with me. Sure. Because I mean, I think the important thing is, and you notice I'm not like these news shows as I'm interviewing people. I'm not trying to play gotcha moments. I'm trying to have like good conversation.
Just a conversation. Right.
Yeah. And like, even on a couple of things we talked about where we're not on the same way, I pushed you on it a little bit, because like, if I don't agree, I'm going to say, even though we're actually in the same party, like,
but that's the thing that's supposed to happen.
Yeah, because
That's
you're
the
supposed to
way
be
it's
able to share
supposed to work.
perspectives so you can find a way to meet in the middle so we can live together
Yeah.
in this great country in this great state of Texas. So, any closing words you want to give before we wrap up here?
It's again, the idea should be that we talk about what's going on. It's not, it has to be this way or it has to be that way. Find something, a common ground, meet in the middle, and when you're there, I'm there, and we just make it work. I don't have any real parting remarks. I mean, I could probably find something that I've said before, but yeah, vote for me.
All right. Well, and then I'll throw it out there. You know, if you guys are kind of tired of both sides of the government, like raiding your pockets to fill their coffers, and you guys are tired of both sides taking turns, like trying to explain to you
The
what
pendulum
yeah,
swings.
exactly, trying to explain to you exactly why you need to follow uh what they're trying to do. And what area are you in? You're up near Dallas, right?
I am northwest of Dallas.
Okay, so you're
I'm in
like,
Denton County.
okay, so yeah, so I see the district here. It looks like it kind of circles the town of Denton, but not
Yes.
in Denton County.
It's in Denton County. It's just
No, I mean
circling
the city
around
of Denton, or
the city of Denton. Yeah.
yeah.
It was heavily gerrymandered to favor the Republicans.
Well, of course it was, because the Republicans had control of the state houses. So
Right.
it'd be nice if we could get some gerrymandering. All we'd need as libertarians is to get a evenly divided districts, and we'd be able to like take from both of them.
All we would need, and this is probably step one of, like, I've got a several step plan, is to get an independent group in here to draw the boundaries. It can't be Republican, it can't be Democrat, it has to be an independent group, nonpartisan, just to make sure that everybody is represented.
Well, the reality is everybody's partisan, so we need to have it bipartisan and equal, so they can't push anything through that they don't agree on.
I could work
So
with that.
they need to find something that they need to find common ground.
Right.
And like, if they can't pass it, okay, well, it's not changing then. So you guys better work it out.
Yeah. And it's
Anyway,
gotta be done.
Well, thanks again for joining me. And again, guys, remember, if you're up there by Denton, out there in Denton County, around the town of Denton, if you want an option other than Republicans telling you how to live and spending your money, and Democrats telling you how to live and spending your money, there is another option, and a restoration of freedom and fiscal responsibility through the Libertarian Party. And it just starts with the first one. It takes one step to start the movement.
Yep.
So thank you again, Darren, for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Rob.
It's my pleasure. Now, revelers, I do want to say we are going to be back later with more interviews. I think I have a break here I've got a break until 7:00. One of my interviews had to reschedule for another day because they got a lot going on, obviously. So thanks again for joining us, and you guys have a great evening. And out we go.